Abby, are you starting a fight? You want to start a fight?
I prefer not to fight people. Especially not students.
Conflict.
Alright, so this is week 3.
What's your
We're actually finishing up our first unit tonight. So we talked about what it means to have a vision and a purpose for our lives. We talked about what it means to be made in the image of God. And as we are talking about tonight, is conflict management. So before we hop into conflict management, any questions over anything that we've talked about so far? No. Okay. Cool. Well, if questions come up, feel free to just ask me or interrupt me. That's fine. So, anyways, conflict. Huh? Oh, sorry. I thought someone said something. I'm not feeling the greatest, guys, so if I don't hear you for some reason,
can we pray for you?
Repeat yourself.
Let's pray for Abby.
Well, I'm not going to throw up. It's not that type of thing. It's like the type of thing where like I can't hear well anyways, and then my ears are like unplugged, so I can't hear anybody.
Let's just pray for 1 minute.
Contagion? Huh?
You take 1 minute.
Pray for
Pray for 1 minute. If you really want to.
Everyone gets like a second to pray for her, okay?
1 word. No, we're just gonna be one. Yeah, I'll just pray. I'll just pray, but we need our hands together to support her as the body of Christ. So, Jesus, thank you for Abby. Thank you that she's here tonight representing you. Lord, just getting her own services and time. We know it's a blessing for her, but we're just really blessed to see that she models what it means to be blessed, to be a blessing to others. So, Father, just pray that you would, the word is blessed tonight, really just restore her body. And that's what you are. You're a God of great favor. And so, Lord, just thank you for, once again, your mercies, which are made new every day. And it's not over yet, so it's not too late for you to just renew her body now. And Lord, as she speaks, just peace and freedom in the Spirit, and security in Christ in Jesus' name.
Amen.
That's always a teaching moment for me because I'm so resistant to help and resistant to different But that was good. I needed that reset. So thank you. Tonight we're talking about conflict, and so Google defines conflict as a serious disagreement or argument, typically like a protracted one. And protraction just means lasting longer or longer than expected. And in other words, you could think of conflict as kind of like it's just this breach of harmony that's lasting for longer than maybe you anticipated, or it's just a long time in general. And you know, we've all experienced conflict. Conflict can be over anything. It can be about anything. It can be, as Christians, we can have conflict with other Christians over sin issues. As people, we can have conflict with other people over selfishness, immaturity. Just we have different perspectives on things sometimes. So it might not even be this issue of someone's right, someone's wrong. It just might be this issue of we're seeing the same thing, just different ways, and that's causing us not to be agreeing on the best course of outcome or whatever. Conflict can be internal. A lot of us have experienced internal conflict as maybe just this feeling of unsettledness or no peace. And while we're going to be focusing primarily on external conflicts or conflict with others, internal conflict is something you still want to be taking seriously, because internal conflict can cause external conflict. It can be a sign of external conflict. Or honestly, guys, if you're walking around feeling like something's wrong in my soul, like that's just not a fun place to be. And so whenever you are experiencing internal conflict, just take it seriously. Go to your word, pray with God, kind of discern, like, am I having an issue with somebody I need to address? Is there like a sin issue maybe that's keeping a barrier between me and God? Or maybe I just growing into the new creation that you promised me, and that's causing a little bit of just stress or unsettledness in my life right now. So always in those situations, take time to reflect, take time to reach out, talk to your mentor. They can help you go through the word and discern the spirit on this. But conflict, whether it's internal or external, it's just this inevitable part of life. And kind of like we mentioned briefly earlier, it's not necessarily bad. Conflict can be really, really healthy, and it can also be something that allows you to grow. For me, conflict has sometimes revealed blind spots I didn't know I had, or has helped me grow more as a person. So really what we're wanting to focus on and learn here is not avoiding conflict, which is a lot more comfortable for most people, myself included, but learning how to manage it during conflict, before conflict, afterwards, just kind of knowing how can we helpfully approach this topic of conflict. So we're going to start by looking at Matthew 18, 15 through 17, sorry. And then once we get there, if I can have a volunteer just go ahead and read that out for me, that would be awesome.
Okay. You said, yep.
Yep.
If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church, and if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector.
Okay, thank you.
I had to endure.
So this passage comes between Jesus' transfiguration, so that's where he goes up to the mountain and the Spirit of God manifests him in his glorious state. And so it's between this really awesome event of who Jesus is going to be glorified and Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. So we're kind of in this place of almost but not quite yet in this passage. And if you read the whole chapter, it's really beautiful because it has these themes of just forgiveness and humility and what it means to serve others. And those are things that is important to remember in the face of conflict. To remember that, you know, it's not just getting my way, it's about showing Christ to this person that I am disagreeing with. And so kind of the very first thing that we see in this passage is that it does tell us to address conflict. I know for some people, again, myself included, that's not a comfortable thought. That's something I will put off until absolutely necessary, if necessary. But verse 15, it's really clear that whenever there's tension, you are to be addressing it in the relationship. And I love how it points out it's supposed to be between you and whoever the tension's with. Not you and your 15 closest friends, you and the person you're at tension with. And what's even cooler is the Greek word for sin in verse 15. It has a bunch of definitions. It means to be without a sharon, to miss the mark, to err, be mistaken, to miss or wander from the path of uprightness or an honor, to do or go wrong, to wander from the law of God, or violate God's law. So as we can see, it's not just saying like, oh, only address if it's a sin issue, or if it's, you know, something really big it's affecting a lot of people. There's a really broad definition that this can fall under, and it's really getting at, if you're at tension with someone, just talk to them about it, bring it up, and address what is causing the tension. The second thing is that at this point, once you've brought it up to the person just between you and them, there's kind of 2 ways conflict will tend to go. The first is that you might talk to them and you guys might resolve the issue and like there, problem solved. The other is you might talk to them and there might not be a resolution. And it might be something where you need to bring in other people in order to get to this place of harmony. And really, when we're talking about conflict resolution, we're talking about returning to this place of harmony. Either it's the harmony y'all had before you had tension, or it's a new harmony that you both are forgiving of each other, you're loving each other, and like there's just nothing, there's not that guilt or weight of the tension between you. Now real quick, I want to make a distinction between the conflict we're talking about and then what we typically see in abuse, because I think sometimes we can use this to excuse that type of behavior. In conflict, when we're talking about it, it really is that breach of harmony, and it's not someone trying to gain power over anyone. It's not necessarily even intentional most of the time. Most of the time people you'll be in conflict with aren't trying to like make you upset. And someone's not trying to take advantage over someone else. It's something that can be worked through, something that should be worked through. Abuse, on the other hand, abuse is always someone trying to gain power over another person by manipulating them, manipulating a situation, manipulating a system, anything that they can use to gain power and gain control. While people can make cases that you should forgive abuse that happens, this is not the type of conflict I'm talking about. So I'm not, I personally like Abby's opinion on even thoughts on this, although I can guarantee you Ryan would agree. I think that, the Bible gives you freedom to leave abusive situations. I don't think Jesus calls you to stick that out. I don't think he calls you to make it work. And we kind of even get a glimpse of that here in that passage in verse 17 when we hear talking about what happens if just people don't want to make it work, don't want to work through it. So again, I want the best of you guys, and I know, we always think we're smart enough, it can never happen to us, but if you ever find yourself in a situation that is abusive, or you're even kind of questioning, is this normal, is this okay? I want you to fight back against that lie that you deserve it because you don't, and really take that freedom to leave, talk to someone, figure something out. It'll be really, really hard, but you don't deserve a situation where someone is using power over you. So kind of with that distinction of mind, we're talking about a breach of harmony, the things we experience every day. We fight with my roommates over dishes or something, that's what we're talking about when we go through these rules here. So as you can kind of see here, first step, bring it up with that person. If you guys can work it out and get to a place of harmony, great, problem solved, we're done. If you guys can't get into that place of harmony, you might need to bring in someone else to help mediate the conflict. That godly person, it could be parents, it could be a mentor, it could be a pastor, if you're, depending on the type of conflict, it might be a counselor, just whoever that is. The gist of it is they're not supposed to be someone you're just gossiping about or you're just venting or whatever. They're supposed to be committed to you and to getting you and this person back to a place of restoration. Now, ideally the process stops here, but even we go further. Sometimes conflict just can't be resolved, and sometimes people don't want it to work, and don't want it to be resolved. And so in those cases, sometimes the church even needs to get involved. And I'm not going to get into church discipline. If you have questions, my dad's an elder and he'd love to talk to you. I do not want to talk about church discipline. It's a big can of worms. But essentially, verse 17 is talking about, if that person's unwilling to come to a place of harmony, sometimes the best thing to do is just distance yourself from the relationship and move on. Again, the Bible is very clear about forgiveness, and we're going to touch on that at the end. But forgiving doesn't necessarily mean you have to continue a relationship with them. It might mean just parting, and this is a last resort thing. It's a really sad thing, a really hard thing. But the Bible does give provision for that if that does happen. And for me, I think Romans 12 is just a really good supplement to this passage. Romans 12 talks a lot about what it means to live in peace, especially within the context of persecution. And while that's not quite what we have in focus here, Romans 12:18 is a really great verse that talks about, as far as it's dependent on us, to live at peace with other people. And so, wherever you are, whatever your situations, we're called to live at peace, and that looks differently for each of us. But I love it because sometimes living at peace with someone might mean you're just not besties and we're not in a close relationship. And that's something where we just kind of move on and we forgive and love like Jesus in that way. So now that we kind of have a framework for how we can deal with conflict, first talk to them. If that doesn't work, bring in someone else who can help with that situation and talk it through with you all. And if that doesn't work, then bring in church people who know and love you, and they will help figure out what's best for you, even if that might mean you walking away. Hopefully, though, we don't get to that step and we're able to kind of figure out conflicts and stuff like that. So So what we're going to talk about next is the styles people tend to come at conflict with. And I want to caveat real quick that none of these styles are in and of themselves bad. There are situations where you might need to use it. But all of us do come at these probably more predominantly in one area than the other. So these styles are divided into axes. You have assertiveness and you have cooperativeness on the bottom part. And the first one we're going to start with is the avoiding personality. And so the avoiding personality is called so because there's very low assertiveness and there's very low cooperation. An avoiding style would work best if it's not like appropriate or safe or just beneficial to address the conflict at the time. So an example would be like if someone made a joke about you in a group, like it might not be the most beneficial thing to come at them right then and be like, hey, you hurt my feelings, like what's up, dude? It might be better to take some time back from that situation and then address later between the two of you, like, hey, I know you thought you were trying to be funny, but it was really hurtful to me. And that can be something you could share as a withhold, which is a tool that we're going to discuss later. Moving along to the right, you have accommodating. Accommodating happens when someone's super willing to cooperate and figure things out, but not very assertive about what they need or about what they perceive as the best situation. And this is a good style to use if you don't really care what the outcome is. So an example would be like if you're deciding where to go out to eat and someone is hardcore wanting to go tacos and you're like, I don't really care where we go. Like the accommodating style is the best place to be. The caveat with this though is if you use an accommodating style in a conflict where it does matter to you, you'll only cause resentment. You won't solve the conflict, you'll just cause resentment, and resentment just grows and festers. And so something that my roommates and I, all of us are pretty non-confrontational, we're pretty chill people. But my mom told us, like, guys, if you are in conflict with somebody, like trying to figure something out, rank the conflict of importance to you guys. So we were trying to figure out pictures, and one of my roommates was like kind of doing this thing where she was indicating she didn't want to hang up some of her personal pictures. And so we just said, hey, like, where's this on for you? And for the rest of us, it was 2. And for her, it was a 4 or 5 that we didn't hang them up. So we're like, hey, it matters more to you. We just won't hang it up. That's a good strategy is kind of each person rank it. And if it matters more to one person, then that's the person you can go with. In the middle, we have the compromising style. The compromising style is when there's equal levels of cooperation and assertiveness. And so a compromising style works great if you have to make a decision really quickly and what the outcome of that decision isn't crucial. So say you're going to a concert in Kansas City and you need to figure out rides real quick. And the compromising thing might be just to kind of shuffle people in cars. And you know what? People might not be happy with the car that they ended up in, but everybody gets to Kansas City, you make it to the concert on time. And so the hard thing with the compromising style is that while it does get you kind of a quick fix, we figured it out, people typically aren't super happy if this is a style you use. But at the same time, if it's not a big deal, people hopefully will just get over it. In the upper left-hand corner, we see the competing style, which is where someone is super assertive in what they want and not very cooperative. And I know at first glance, especially for me, I was like, oh, this is not a good style at all. But this is actually the perfect style you need to use where the outcome of the situation is super critical and the relationship may or may not be. So think of like if you went to a church and they're teaching something that's kind of heretical. That would be a situation where we're not compromising on what the Bible says. Like that is a hard line and it matters where we end up in this conflict. And so, you know, that part gets tricky with relationships and stuff, but at the end of the day, you don't ever want to be in a position where you're compromising Christ for the sake of a relationship. And then moving to the right, we have the final style, which is the collaborating style. And this is high in cooperativeness and high in assertiveness. This style, it works best in situations where the outcome is critical and maintaining the relationship, like a long-term relationship, things like that is very important. And so for this style to work, you need time. You need usually a lot more time than the rest of the styles to figure out what do people actually want, what can we do to get to a situation that works for everybody. And you guys have to genuinely want to work through something that works best for both people. So for example, a conversation about like what do healthy boundaries look like in a friendship or a relationship, that would be an example of a collaborating one because you know, it's a relationship that matters to you. You want it to last, but also the outcome's important. You need to establish healthy boundaries in whatever type of relationships you find yourself in, friendships or otherwise. And so, now it might be an uncomfortable conversation, but that's a conversation where it's worth the time, it's worth the discomfort to really talk through and hone out what is valuable to both of you. So now that we've kind of overviewed these styles, that's not the slide I wanted. There are some tips that I wanted to talk through real quick to help us when we're going through conflict. And so the first one is work through it in person. We live in the technological world and it's so much easier to try to settle things over text. But unless it's something that like genuinely doesn't matter that could be settled over text, most of the time it just won't work. You miss out so much when you're not doing things face to face, like body language, tone of voice. There's so much more that is said non-verbally than verbally, and so it's whenever you can, it's best to be able to do things face to face so you can get a real reading of where they're at and what they're saying. So whenever possible, really try to sit down with that person, go face to face. If you can't do it face to face, you know, try a FaceTime or another video chatting app. If you can't do that, then try a call, because at least at that point you're getting tone of voice and it's a real-time conversation. If absolutely necessary, you could try going at it with text, but if it's a very serious conflict, text probably won't end up getting you guys to a solution that works. Tip number 2 is take a break. So the science behind this is super interesting. And I know it sounds super counterintuitive to be like, wait, so you're telling me how to address conflict, but then you're also telling me that when I'm in conflict to take a step back from conflict? The thing is, yeah, because your brain is, when you are stressed out, you produce more cortisol, which is a stress hormone. When more cortisol floods into your prefrontal cortex, which is your decision-making ability, that takes away your ability to actually make good decisions, like neurons deplete. They've done studies of people who are angry, and their neurons are depleting. And so when you're in the heat of the moment, you are literally not thinking clearly. And so the best thing you can do is just take a step back and wait until your serotonin levels, which are like they're some of the happiness hormones, they come back, and then you're able to think more clearly and you can address the conflict like a rational person. Because we're not nearly as rational as we think we are when we're being irrational. And so, you know, at the same time, Ephesians 4, it does address, you know, don't let the sun go down while you're angry. So you don't want to let too much time pass between conflict happening. But, you know, also in the Bible, I think it's Proverbs 15:1 says that a gentle answer turns away wrath. And you just rarely can give a gentle answer when you're so upset. So this is where a tool that I personally love is withholds. And so this first came about in these marriage psychologist doctors, Les and Leslie Kerr. And I personally find their material helpful even if you're not married. But if you are married, I've heard really wonderful things about their materials as well. But withholds is when you have something positive or negative to share with someone that you simply, due to the, you know, maybe life's been busy, you just haven't had a chance to share with them or intentionally share with them. And so if you have something positive or negative you want to share with the person, you begin that conversation by saying, hey, I would like to share a withhold with you. If they agree that now's a good time to share a withhold, both of you will get out a piece of paper and write down 3 withholds you'd like to share that have occurred within the past couple of days. So that's 2 positive things and then 1 negative thing. Once you guys have written them down, you'll take turns then sharing those withholds using the sandwich method. So basically you start with something positive, you deliver something negative, and you affirm with something positive in the end. And guys, it has to be genuine positive things. It can't just be fluff, a serious issue, and then more fluff. It has to be genuine positive things that you want to share with the person for this to work. And here's the hard part. All that person can say to you in response to you sharing your withholds is thank you. So like as in like, thank you for sharing that information with me. After the first person has shared, then the second person shares, and they have to share what they wrote down. They can't change it to kind of like, kind of maybe deliver kind of an explanation for why or whatever the negative thing is. So they have to share their 3 original withholds. Then after that, the person says thank you. And then anything negative that you shared during the course of that conversation is off limits for the next half hour. Again, that kind of gives you time to cool down if you got upset over the negative thing that was shared. But sometimes what they shared in the material that I read and the video I watched is that sometimes after that half hour, you guys come back and realize you don't need to discuss it further. Sometimes the negative withhold that was shared was just kind of like, oh, I didn't realize that bothered you. Yeah, I can totally not do that or whatever. And in the moment, what seemed like a big deal, after kind of cooling down a little bit, you realize wasn't. And so that's on the back of your sheet, because I just feel like that's a very helpful tool to be sharing with conflict management. Okay, next thing, and this is my final really big tip, is just remember you're talking to another person. It goes a long way to use active listening and leading with empathy in conversations. We talked about how you guys are an image bearer and the value and importance Jesus puts on you because of that you were made in his image. Well, he places that same value and importance on the person that you're in conflict with, even if at the time you kind of just aren't really feeling it and they're annoying you. Active listening will always cover and uncover a multitude of sins, kind of as the saying goes. Well, I tweaked it. But when you're in conflict with someone, there are occasions with what you're discussing is not actually the issue. So kind of a classic example I hear is like if you are in disagreement with someone over like household chores, whether that's a roommate or a parent or a spouse, oftentimes you might be disagreeing about this household chore, like, hey, you need to do this or you need to do this. But really that might be fueled by feelings of disrespect or just like you don't value my time. And so what you get out with conflicts like that is really, you do want to solve who's doing what chore by when. But really you want to get at fixing like, okay, I'm hearing that really you want me to do this, but it's because you feel this disrespect. We need to address that and fix that for this conflict to actually be resolved. And so if you guys ever find yourself having the same types of arguments over and over with someone, likely what you're doing is you're just solving the surface level here, but you're not solving what's fueling that underneath. And so to be able to actually get past this conflict, you'll have to talk about what's fueling that. And then the other bit is just, empathy goes a long ways, guys. Remembering that this person has their own story, has their own emotions, their own feelings. That's not to say you justified anything and everything, but that is to say you want to give empathy, you want to give benefit of doubt, and you don't want the first story that you write in your mind when you experience conflict with someone that's like, oh, they're a bad person or whatever. You want to be like, well, maybe they didn't invite me to a party because they didn't have enough room or something. You want to think the best of people. And this is where the part about, when we read this whole passage in context, the humility, the forgiveness, the serving others, this is where empathy comes in. Empathy helps you remember those things. It helps you remember how to be like Jesus in the midst of conflict. So I want to take a little bit of time to work through an activity, but before I do, I want to end on a quick word of forgiveness. The word on